All right, so welcome to the 4-H Animal Science series. If you are here to learn about marketing livestock in 2020, a very interesting year, then you are in the correct place. Before we begin, I'm going to ask everyone to turn off their cameras as well as make sure they're muted. This helps with the broadband speed, as well as another important note. These videos are recorded and posted on our 4-H YouTube channel, so we just want to make sure that we protect everybody on the call. So without further ado, just a couple housekeeping reminders. Again, if you'll just be so kind as to stay muted throughout the presentation, that would be fantastic. As we go along, if you have questions, there at the bottom of the screen, if you kind of scroll over with your mouse, or if you're on a phone, just look for the chat box, and if you type in those questions, you can, or if you have questions, you can type them in there. My name is Courtney Steerwalt, and today I am joined by Miranda Edge, who is the Ag and Natural Resources Extension Educator in Harrison County, so really close down south in Louisville, down close to Louisville, I should say. So we were just talking earlier, and she's about 25 minutes from there. So we are glad that she could join us today to share with us some of her knowledge. Miranda's quite active in the farmers market programs, and hopefully will share with us some tips and tricks to think about as we begin to think about how we're going to market our 4-H animals. So I'll turn it over to Miranda.
Okay, thanks, Courtney, and welcome. Thanks for stopping in today, and I hope we can answer some questions. Unfortunately, because it is a difficult year, I may not be able to answer everybody's questions or give you the answers that you're looking for. So be open-minded. This year is probably my #1 suggestion. And we'll go through a few things that you probably do know already, and maybe you'll learn a little bit about some different ideas and niche marketing ideas that we can give you to help you with completing your project this year and selling your livestock projects. So I know you're probably just as frustrated as I am when it comes to figuring out how to sell these animals this year for your project. It's not going to be easy. You've probably found out that the processors are fairly booked up, and the market prices are really low right now. It's just not a great year, unfortunately. So we can look into some other ways to help. Maybe your fair has gone virtually and canceled the auction, and maybe they've gone to a premium only auction or a virtual auction. These suggestions and ideas may help a little bit with those virtual and premium auction options and work to your advantage. So we'll go through a few of those now. In a normal 4-H year, your market species are the ones that you would sell in a live auction. This year may be of benefit to you. If you've got breeding animals, you don't normally participate in the auction, and your fair does choose to do a premium auction, you might be able to offer those as a premium sale. If you've never gone through that before, premiums are usually more of a buyer or a bidder sponsoring that youth and their project, and they do not collect on the animal with their purchase. So that animal can go home with the 4-H'er to do with please. With your virtual and live auctions, of course, buyer has the option to send that animal back to the youth, to a base bidder, or take them themselves to be processed. So those are options that we would normally see, and this year you might be able to expand your marketing and even look into some different buyers to bring into a premium auction scenario that would help. So remember, this year, all livestock are going to be marketable. You're normally going to see your fat steers, market heifers rather, and feeder calves, but this year you may also be able to market those breeding heifers, breeding gilts along with fat hogs, breeding stock along with your feeder calves and fat steers for your dairy animals. Your breeding stock in goats and sheep might be an option. And then for rabbits, rabbits and poultries are historically not as well, or not as popular rather, in our auctions, but maybe this year they will be a good addition to your normal county auctions as a different species subset that can be easily processed and used by your buyer. Okay, so let's look at where options. We've probably all know all of these, but let's just go through them just in case there's somebody out there that doesn't know maybe where a local auction. I went and did a little research, and Indiana has several livestock auction barns across the state. So you can see in Boswell, Rockville, Shipshewana, Springville, Logansport, Vincennes, Little York, Worthington, and Rochester. They all have some sort of an auction barn. These guys are well represented within the county. They work with many producers within each of your counties, I'm sure, and surrounding counties, and would be a great local supporter if you're not already using them. Here in Harrison County, we do work a lot with United Producers because we have Little York close by, and we also have an Irvington, Kentucky barn that we can work with. So that those people are our support staff. They help with selling animals that we can't sell, maybe those out hogs that can't go through the auction. They have been base bidders in the past, which means if you've never used a base bidder, that they create a bid on the based on the market price for the animals. And if your auction buyer does not want that animal, they can send it back to the base bidder, who will pay that market-based price that they have already bid, and then your buyer at the auction pays whatever is above and beyond that amount. So say we've got a hog that goes for $500 and the base bid was $150. The base bidder is going to pay that $150. That buyer will pay everything else up to $500, so that the youth gets the entire amount. The animal has a place to go, and that youth is able to complete that year with some satisfaction and know that their animal has gone to the local food chain and has held some service. You may also look into these livestock auctions to help with your breeding animals. This year, we're seeing better prices for our feeder calves, and sometimes those premium auctions will bring a better price for maybe a group of open heifers or shortbred heifers, or if you've got any other breeding stock within sheep and goats per se, those may be some great options. I would highly recommend contacting those livestock auction barns, talking with the barn managers and seeing if they already have scheduled premium sales, if they have good buyers and they feel like they could sell a set of feeder calves from your fair. This may be a great year for some of those smaller animals or some of those non-traditional 4-H auction animals that normally would just maybe go home with the youth. So look into those. Do remember though that some of them will take that commission on the top. Sometimes they'll pay it as part of support, but look into those options and be in good communication with those livestock auction barns for some options with selling some of those animals. If your livestock auction is not available, it's just not going to work. Of course, we do have local processors. And if anybody's already looked, you know just as well as I do that most of them are booked up through into next year. Several of them around here are booked in well into March of 2021. I've got one particular processor that has held a couple of spots for me here in Harrison County for some 4-H animals. But unfortunately, most of the processors around them have been absolutely bombarded with local producers and have no more spots available for these 4-H animals. So look into those a little bit more. If you are normally go to a state and federal inspected plant, look into some of your deer processing facilities and things where you're able to go in a non-inspected and sell those as a freezer beef in whole animal form. That means you might be able to sell the whole animal as a whole to a particular buyer or family, or your particular family might be able to take that animal and bring it home yourself using those non-inspected processor locations. Of course, these are all going to be small scale, so if you're looking for a 4-H group as a whole, it may not be helpful, but if you're on individual and looking to sell or process one species, that may be an option this year. When you get to the state and federal inspected processors, you're going to be able to get into more of those specialty cuts, which means you have that opportunity to sell at a roadside stand or in a farmer's market. So looking into that may also be an option. Looking to sell maybe at the farmer's market in your local area 1 or 2 weekends this summer. Look maybe at offering not only your meat products, but if you raised a garden for a gardening project, you might be able to sell some of those to some different to your customers at a farmer's market to help bring in those customers and keep them coming back for more of your product. So your other option might be your private sales. So not only as processing for meat, but you may also be able to sell as a private sale between a neighbor or another family member or somebody down the road looking to add a new heifer to their herd, or you've got some feeder calves that they can take and raise to market weight. So those are some options. But when you do that, make sure you know your animal. Make sure you know what your market price is for that particular species. You may want to go in to the deal, understanding what your animal's average daily gain was, what kinds of inputs you have put in to feed that animal and care for that animal this whole time, so that you know you're making at least a break even, if not a profit. That will be very hard this year, knowing market prices are low. But it is important to look at that and understand that. You may not be able to make a profit on your animal this year, but go into that sale with that knowledge of what you have done and how you have handled this animal over the process of your, or over the time period of its life, whether that's from the time you purchased it or from the time it was born. So I'll go into a little bit more of how. I've alluded to a little bit of this, but maybe we'll go into some different suggestions and ideas. So starting with those livestock auction barns, you will start by loading up that animal, dropping off. The auction will take place. They'll sell your animal and you'll get that check. This is a pretty easy, low stress option for you as the owner. A lot of times, like our local areas have a weekly sale for cattle. So if you have a feeder calf or you have a steer that maybe isn't up to market weight yet, this could be an option for you. Go in knowing what that market price may be that day. Your animal will be sold as a lot with other animals of its same size, color, and possibly other traits and factors that the barn manager is looking for to create a whole load. This does come with commission fees taken off the top, so you will have a little bit of a reduced income coming back in that check. You'll also have your checkoff money taken out automatically from that check. So this is quite an easy option. And as I said before, you may also look into the premium auctions that might be available for bred animals, or if you've got any other specialty animals that the premium auctions might be looking for, you may be able to have those availabilities to sell at a later date with a little bit more work. Using those local processors, not only can you sell to a family member or to some of your other customers for freezer beef, you may also be able to look into this program called Hoosiers Feeding the Hungry. Hoosiers Feeding the Hungry is a donation of large game and livestock meat to a program that they're calling Meet the Need program. And this is to low-income families and food banks to help support an increase in protein available where maybe they're not able to get that, especially now with grocery stores increasing their prices on meat and even not having enough inventory of meat in the stores for them to purchase. There are several local processors across the state that are serving this program and have signed up to support it. You can go to this website, HoosierFeedingTheHungry.org, to look up the list of processors and find one that is closest to you. Talk to them about how to work your animal into their processing timeline and work with the group of Hoosier Feeding the Hungry to get that to a local food bank. The program does pay the processing fee on a regular basis, but if you've got an auction and you have a buyer or a bidder that's looking to purchase your animal and send this to a program like Hoosier Feeding the Hungry, encourage them to help pay those support fees, the processing fees and things, so that more of these animals and more protein can get out to our low income community, and we can help out with that. This is a really popular program for our deer population or deer hunters. And so we would like to see an increase in this with our beef and hog meats, if at all possible, so that we can bring some more local foods to those local communities. Kind of a last option and a last resort that I would highly suggest you think about hard and for a while before you get into is at-home processing. Now, this really only would work for poultry. The USDA has a rule where 1,000 birds per farm per year can be processed without being inspected. Now, that doesn't mean you can just go out back like grandma used to do and process in the backyard. This is going to take a little bit more effort. Humane handling, there's some guidelines on how to clean up, different equipment to use, and how to process those birds. So you're not going to be cutting them up into quarters or specific cuts. These will be sold whole. They must be sold frozen. But it is an option that you could look into. If you want more information about at-home processing for poultry, you can give me send me an email, and I can help you look up more information on how to make this work. This is something that I do personally, is some at-home processing, and we're looking into how to use this for our youth meat poultry projects for this year to maybe help support those kiddos that need some assistance, and also to give a little education on the continuation of the food chain and how they are a part of that. When you get into some other species, rabbits have a similar requirement. However, you do need a Board of Animal Health permit to be able to process those animals. And again, be sold whole and frozen and vacuum packaged, much like the poultry. So there are some stipulations and guidelines on those. When you get into the larger animals, number one, a lot more meat to handle. It's harder to process a large beef or a large hog unless you've got the facilities available, you've got the clean floor area, you've got a large enough table to process, or you're able to hang them in a barn in an area where you reduce the amount of contamination possibilities and reduce pathogens so that you don't make yourself sick. If you do choose at-home processing for your animals, please, please, please be sure to use those food regulations requirements. And if you're going for those larger species, only use that to feed your own family. Please, I highly discourage you trying to do at-home processing for your larger animals, and only use those for these smaller animals where food laws have been put into place by the USDA. And that's the end of this presentation. I know there's probably several questions about this. These are just some ideas and guidelines when you are looking to market those animals to your bidders. Look for different ideas and ways to get the information out there about your animals. I did a little research across the state, and I found a couple of programs in another state where they were doing marketing videos with their youth. And one particular young lady did a wonderful YouTube video where she presented her 4-H projects for the year, had them all cleaned up, set out in a line, and she explained them and gave reasons about her projects. And then in particular, she was selling a market steer in her project. And so she went through what his weight was and what the carcass information was from the carcass scanning project, and all of those different details that she learned from her project. And she used that education and what she had learned this year to help market that animal, hopefully to a bidder that would be interested in purchasing that animal, whether that would be a virtual auction, through a premium auction, or a live auction. And so with that, please let me know if you've got other great ideas to share. And Courtney, I'll let you help me bring up some questions, because I'm not seeing the chat box at all.
All right, so again, thank you. Someone asked about the survey. So there's a survey on the screen to let your counties know that you're here. I'll post the link in the chat box here in a minute. But Miranda, can you kind of explain the process of getting, selling meat at a farmer's market in particular?
Sure. Most of the meat sold at a farmer's market are going to be at least state inspected, if not federally or USDA inspected. That is an absolute requirement. The other major requirement for selling meat at a farmer's market is they must be sold frozen. So looking into those possibilities, your local processors are quite booked up right now. And if you were lucky to get a scheduled appointment, you're already ahead of the game. When you get that appointment and you're able to process that animal, you can ask for special cuts yourself, and those will be packaged individually with weights. And you'll have to have some sort of a farm tag that can either be put in the bag or placed on the bag after the meat product has been processed. This will include, you know, your information about your farm, your name, how to get a hold of you, the amount of product in the bag by ounce or pounds, and then it'll have an inspected seal that will go on that bag as well. There's sometimes extra permitting required through your local health department. Here in Harrison County, as long as the labeling is on the package correctly, it's sold frozen. We don't have an extra local permit, but I know there are some counties that require a food handling permit to sell at a farmer's market. So it's something to look into with your health department. And just having those kept in a freezer. The farmers that are selling at our farmers market right now, we've got somebody selling pork, another one selling beef, and then I've got another one selling chicken. And so they've kind of each got their own system, but they all have freezers, and we have them back straight into the market booth and plug them in as soon as they pull in. And so the only time that those products are potentially at a not plugged in a freezer would be their trip from the farm to the market. And that's a pretty important thing, is keeping those products frozen. If they start to thaw out, that can cause some issues with contamination. So those are some kind of things that they work with here in our county.
Okay, great. Another question is just suggestions for how to market your 4-H animal to an individual that might be purchasing it? So really like a marketing plan for sharing that. Like what kind of tips would you have for buzzwords, for resources to sell under that kind of thing?
So like a private treaty
Yeah.
sale,
So
private sale?
I'm looking, I guess if I had an animal, if I had a steer that I wanted to sell to someone in my community, let's say I have an appointment, what would you suggest the best method for that be? And would it be better to sell the animal as a whole or as different, different cuts of meat? What suggestions do you have?
Okay. So if you've already got that appointment, make sure you understand if the processor is a federally inspected or a state inspected processor versus non-inspected. That's going to make a big difference on how you market that. Here in Harrison County, we do not have an inspected processor, but in surrounding counties, we do have a couple of state inspected and a federally inspected processors. So depending on where you get that appointment is where you'll be able to either sell it as a whole live animal in a non-inspected processor or buy retail cuts in a inspected facility. When you're trying to market that to a local person, the buzzwords that I like to use are local, fresh, humanely handled. There's several buzzwords that are popular right now as far as labeling. So if you think about when you walk through the grocery store, the buzzwords that come out and people like to grab for are local, fresh, high quality, premium. You're not going to be able to grade that animal ahead of the process before it's hung. So it's going to be hard to say it's a prime or a choice grade cut, but you can possibly, if you were able to do a carcass scan as part of your project, give the details of your ribeye areas and your back fat thickness as scanned by that project. If that's not a possibility and you're trying to sell this animal as a whole, giving pictures showing a total weight of that animal or approximate weight at the time of slaughter would be a very rather not slaughter, but harvest. Use the word harvest over slaughter. That's a lot simpler, I guess, it's a nicer way to say processed. And let's see, what other things? When you are assisting people with purchasing that animal, know approximately the yield that they would get off that animal. With cattle, it's about 56 to 60% of the total live weight. When you get into hogs, you can get 65% of the total live weight. And so if you've got an idea of how much that would be, that's going to be a big question that most people will ask when looking to purchase, whether it's a quarter, half, or whole animal. How much meat are they actually going to get? The other thing you might want to research, and it's not too hard to find, is how much space do I need in my freezer to put that kind of meat away? Some people would don't expect the amount of meat back on half a hog and may find that they don't have a big enough freezer. So looking into some of those numbers, looking into the input of total weight and estimated market price, so that you can make a fair deal and make it economical for that buyer to also purchase from you privately.
All right, awesome. And that is another point that I hadn't really thought about this past weekend. I was talking to some individuals, and to be able to purchase an upright freezer is also very hard at this moment. So a lot of people, because of the current state of affairs and COVID-19, have been doing a lot of locally sourcing of their meat or stocking up, as we know, with toilet paper and paper towel, and I guess even meat. So keep in mind, if you're in the market to buy a freezer, or if you're selling your animal to someone that is looking for one, they might want to secure that sooner rather than later, especially as we move into these summer months when people are amped up to have their barbecues and popsicles and lots of frozen foods on hand. I think probably last question that I'm seeing here, Miranda, is in a normal year, let's say you want to locally market your animal to someone in your community or surrounding, how far in advance would you recommend doing that?
Honestly, if you've got local businesses that would normally support an auction or support the 4-H program, they're going to start getting excited about purchasing and sponsoring in January. That's usually when they start their budget, when they know how much money they have available to spend in marketing and donations and support. And so starting as early as January might be a good idea to at least get them on your radar to say, hey, I want to let you know I have chosen to take a beef project this year with the 4-H project, and I do expect to sell a market steer. And if you would like to support me, please know that our fair will be on July 18th, and our show will be on July 18th, and the auction will be the very next day, or whatever those dates are. But getting those dates on their calendar that early. I know in our county, we like to try to send out letters to sponsors, or have the youth send them out approximately 2 months before our fair, to again remind them these are the dates and here are a couple of passes to the fair. That's something you might be able to work out with your 4-H council to offer. So I don't think it's too early to start that in a January timeframe, when they're starting to look at where they're going to spend their money.
Absolutely. And always make sure that you think, even if you're just selling it to the neighbor for their personal freezer, I would always make sure that you thank them for purchasing your animal, and hopefully they'll be a repeat customer because they like the product, but a little thank you goes a long way for sure.
Absolutely.
So in the chat box, I have shared the survey. I know some of your counties are looking to see who's checking out our weekly sessions, so feel free to copy that down at this time. I also just want to thank Miranda for taking the time this afternoon to kind of give us the 411 on marketing livestock in Indiana at this current at this current time. We really appreciate it. It's a tough subject this year, but keep in mind, hopefully everything will improve and everything will go up. I'm quite sure. It's just a matter of getting through this year. If you ever are struggling to figure out where you're going to market that animal, feel free to reach out and let us try to help you figure out what we can do to assist you in the process. One thing is just to be persistent, and we provided a map on this presentation that will be shared through the recording on our Indiana 4-H YouTube channel. And that map does have a list of local processors, and I would encourage you to call. It might be a little further than you're used to driving, but it might also mean that you have a location, because those are a little bit more challenging to come by at this time. So next week, we hope you'll join us. We're going to actually, as a part of the 4-H Academy, we are going to start our discussion on animal science careers. So I'm super excited to have Barry Delks as well as Elizabeth Byers-Doughton join us next week to talk about what kinds of careers through the Purdue College of Ag, specifically the Animal Science Department, are out there for you. So we hope you'll check that out, especially if you're in grades 9 through 12. It should be a wonderful discussion, and we look forward to seeing you next week. We hope you're staying safe over these next few days. Please make sure you drink water. It's supposed to be a hot one. And as good animal stewards, make sure your animals are staying hydrated and happy as well. So we thank you. And again, we hope to see you next week. And please pop over and click on that survey when you get the chance. Thank you.
Thank you.